Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Pennington. I'm your project development engineer, and I'm gonna, like Pete said, I'm gonna be going over, ooh, there we go. Okay, there it goes. I'm gonna be going over the following topics: water resources, floodplains, aesthetics, air, contamination, and utilities. And I'm sorry, I've got a weed whacker right outside my window here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. All right, so let's start with water resources. Just an overview, water resources are protected by the Clean Water Act and then section 373.4596 of Florida statutes. And it's the procedures are covered in part 2, chapter 11 of our PD&E manual. That's a good resource to look at. All right, oh man, keeps kicking me off the PowerPoint there. Okay. So an overview of water resources. This is going to be stormwater related, talking about surface water, rivers, lakes, streams, oceans, and special designations such as outstanding Florida waters and aquatic preserves, and groundwater, aquifers, and spring sheds. And then wetlands that relate to stormwater. So the procedure overview. So projects impacts to water resources must be evaluated regardless whether it's a federal or state requirement. We do this through the water quality impact evaluation checklist. I use the term wiki for that. And this is required for projects that go through the ETDM screening process. So the level of evaluation needed is going to depend on your project, the area that you're in, the involvement with the water resources, the quality of those water resources, and then potential impacts from your project, and then the potential for implementing non-traditional water quality improvements and sole source aquifers. All right, regulatory agencies and stakeholder coordination, state and federal agencies, and local and regional stakeholders. So we want to coordinate with the Basin Management Action Plan and Reasonable Assurance Plan stakeholders such as FDEP or water management districts. Early coordination through the planning phase and efficient transportation decision-making, the ETDM that Ruth talked about yesterday. So the goal is to identify the water resources and to explore opportunities for joint stormwater projects that can address those issues with stakeholders. And as I said, so the ETAT members for this would be DEP and the water management districts. Okay, so in the environmental look around, this is a process to obtain current water resource information by proactively looking for opportunities for joint stormwater management projects with agencies and stakeholders. And the anticipated action would be to explore the watershed-wide stormwater needs and explore innovative approaches to meeting your permit requirements. So the project manager should convene ELA meetings after the stormwater management requirements are estimated and before the stormwater design decisions are established. And more information can be found in the FDOT drainage manual there. Okay, so projects not qualifying for ETDM are the ones that have no significant effect on water quality. So those would be a non-major state action. And as we discussed yesterday about ETDM, you have the planning screen and programming screen. So the planning screen is where we're going to identify the potential resources to discuss with the other agencies, the ETAT members, and then the programming screen is going to include the district drainage engineer, and permit coordinator to explore opportunities for stormwater treatment. And help scope the water quality evaluation. So there's a lot of information identified during ETDM. I'm not going to read through these, but there's surface water and then there's groundwater information. So now we're going to go through the wiki, the water quality impact evaluation. Okay, so this is like a checklist. So the purpose is to identify and characterize existing water resources in project area, and then to assess the project's potential impacts to water resources and identify and evaluate mitigation measures, and then document everything. Okay, so the process, like we said, convene an ELA meeting prior to completing the checklist, and then complete the checklist based on the outcome of the ELA meeting, and then use the checklist to guide the drainage design, and complete checklist prior to finalizing pond siting analysis. The checklist is required for each alternative unless the alternatives are in the same drainage basin. So summarize the results in the environmental document and the preliminary engineering report, or PER. So the checklist has 5 parts: project information, scope, basin receiving water, characteristics, water quality criteria, and documentation. All right, so here's part 1. It's pretty self-explanatory, just the project information. And then part 2, the scope. They determine if the project discharges to surface or groundwater, or alters the drainage system, or is located in a municipal separate storm sewer system. And part 3 is where we get the information about the basin and receiving water characteristics. Part 4 talks about the water quality criteria, the BMAPs, the TMDLs, and the RAPs. We'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later. And then it has some tables to put in the water body names and all the information about them, the pollutants of concern and the TMDLs and impaired status. And then a second table to summarize the coordination efforts and to have the contacts and identify if coordination is needed after the PD&E phase. And then part 5 is documentation. Oops. Sorry, I went too fast there. Okay. So the environmental document, we're going to summarize the water resources involvement and impacts, and then summarize stormwater features such as the ponds needed to address water resource impacts, and the state whether a project will meet criteria and requirements for the stormwater quantity and quality. And then we want to maintain the water quality impact evaluation checklist in the project file. And for commitments, part 2, chapter 22, see that for guidance. We might have basin management action plan or reasonable assurance plan commitments, environmental look-around commitments, other actions required to advance the project, such as contractor actions, retrofitting structures to increase water quality treatment, building water quality improvement features, actions to increase or improve water quality treatment, hydraulic enhancement, recharge, or reuse projects, continued coordination with water resource agencies, or commitments must be coordinated with other FDOT offices. Okay. So for permits, see Part 1, Chapter 12 of the PD&E manual, and we'll have permits related to NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and DOT has a statewide stormwater management plan that we follow to meet those NPDES requirements. And then we might have permits for total maximum daily load based off the Basin Management Action Plan or Reasonable Assurance Plan. And then we might need an environmental resource permit. So for the NPDES, it was established by the Clean Water Act, and it regulates water pollution caused by MS4s and small construction activity between 1 and 5 acres. The NPDES permit program is administered by the FTE, and it's different from the ERP program. So as I said earlier, FDOT is a regulated MS4 operator and has a statewide stormwater management plan, which defines our actions, methods, and procedures to reduce pollutant discharge. So as a MS4 operator, we must obtain an NPDES stormwater permit and implement a statewide plan that describes the activities to be conducted, methods to be used, and procedures to be followed to reduce the discharge of pollutants from its MS4s to the maximum extent practicable. And techniques include management practices, control techniques, system design, and engineering methods. So for total maximum daily load requirements, these are established by the Florida Watershed Restoration Act, and it promotes improvements in water quality by controlling both point and non-point sources. It's adopted for waters identified as impaired by FDEP. And this map on the right shows these impaired waters. It has the B maps in green, and in the blue is that has the TMDLs adopted. All right, and there's a link to that website at the bottom. Okay, so for an environmental resource permit, this is administered by the water management districts. The ERP regulates alteration of surface water flows and protects functions of wetlands and other surface waters. It prescribes stormwater pond sizes and types, and it regulates stormwater discharge restrictions leaving FDOT right-of-way. It typically requires a post-development discharge not to exceed pre-development discharge. However, in areas with flooding or limited stormwater conveyance infrastructure, it may require post-development discharge to be actually less than the pre-development discharge. And so the ERP should be obtained prior to construction and after phase 2 design plans. So for drainage and pond siting, water quality impacts associated with transportation projects are usually addressed through permitting of stormwater management systems. So like a pond. So general permit requirements prohibit FDOT stormwater projects from causing adverse water quantity impacts to receiving waters in adjacent lands, causing adverse flooding to on-site or off-site property, or adversely impacting existing surface water storage and conveyance capabilities, adversely affecting the quality of receiving water such that the state water quality standards will be violated, and causing adverse secondary impacts to water resources. adversely impacting the maintenance of surface or groundwater levels or surface water flows, and adversely impacting a work for the district. So general permit requires stormwater systems to be capable of performing and functioning as proposed and to comply with any applicable special basin or geographic area criteria. All right, so drainage concepts and stormwater pond locations are established during PD&E to evaluate potential impacts to environmental resources. I know we do surveys like cultural or historical surveys and contamination assessments on some of these ponds. So for each alternative, the PD&E should identify the drainage issues, the alternative stormwater management approach, possible stormwater design concepts to mitigate runoff, and general size and potential locations of stormwater management facilities. And we want to document this in a concept drainage design report or a pond siting report, and it should be summarized in the PER and the environmental document. So the concept drainage design report is for when you don't have pond needs. So like, for example, in an urban area where adjacent land is fully built out and you don't have ponds. For these areas, or you don't need right-of-way for ponds. For these areas, a conceptual drainage design and analysis is prepared to analyze the water quality requirements. And the details of conceptual drainage design analysis are typically expanded in the project's design phase. And this is covered in Part 2, Chapter 11 of the PD&E manual. All right, so for the pond siting analysis, the pond siting report, all stormwater ponds requiring right-of-way acquisition, a pond siting evaluation is required. So the location of the ponds for the preferred alternative must be evaluated for potential impacts to human, natural, cultural, and physical environment. An exploration of innovative opportunities such as regional facilities, joint use facilities, and stormwater reuse systems through the ELA process should be exercised. Okay, so in a pond siting analysis, we're going to identify drainage issues and requirements, present overall stormwater management approach, size ponds to mitigate stormwater issues, and evaluate alternative stormwater management options, identify stormwater pond locations for the preferred alternative, and analyze impacts to other resources at pond sites, at each pond site, and recommend preferred pond sites, and consider aesthetic qualities on ponds on all projects. So opportunities for joint stormwater projects. When developing stormwater treatment and storage needs, identify the regulatory and regional issues and opportunities for cooperative solutions. And so the benefits of joint projects is they're more long-term, and they're cost-effective, and they allow FDOT to be good stewards of water resources. And finally, we're going to document everything that we've talked about. So drainage analysis is documented in the PER, the pond siting report, and summarized in the water section of the environmental document. The stormwater management facility type, size, location, and costs are documented in the pond siting report. And the concept drainage design and analysis is documented in the conceptual design drainage report.